Hello and welcome to Spotlight, and today we're putting the spotlight on voice-over artists, the long-forgotten art in the broadcasting industry. And today we are actually really privileged to have one of the very, very best voice-over artists in the form of Dian Perry. Hello, Dian.
Hello, Brendan. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
How long have you been doing voiceover artistry now? Is that what we call it? Do we call it voiceover artistry? Is that what we call it?
Well, it depends on what country you're in. In the States, it's voice talent. We're the talent. In the UK, it's voice artist, voiceover, voice actor. I like voice actor as a nice general term. I started just after I was a fetus. I started 22 years ago. 22 years ago last month.
The industry 22 years ago and the industry today for voiceover artists, has it changed much?
Well, I think it's always changing. I mean, I can only speak from my experience. When I started, my main goal was to be a cartoon voice. That was always my dream as a child. And so when I finally woke up, when I was 36, I think, and remembered that I had wanted to do that, then I just did anything I could to just get even in the right atmosphere, in the right sphere of doing that job. So I started doing a lot of radio commercials. That was my way in. It wasn't what I set out to do, but I ended up loving it. And then I did get into cartoons, and then I started doing narration and, sort of testing out what part of the voiceover industry I really liked and which areas I didn't really like that much, and just started to carve out a career, really. I have to say animation is my favorite, but I really do love medical narration as well. I love a juicy medical narration script, and the more difficult the words are to pronounce, the more I like it, because when you learn how to pronounce those things, you feel like you're speaking another language, like secret language that only a select few can understand. So I get a real kick out of that. And I remember as a child reading a science fiction book called Journey to the Mushroom Planet, I think it was. And there was this made-up chemical name in this book, and it actually went across two lines. And I remember it, and I trot it out every once in a while. It's tritromethylbenzocarbonethylene. And so when I do medical narration, they say, "Oh, are you okay with all the pronunciations?" I sort of trot that out, and they go, "Oh my gosh." So, I love language and tongue twisters and hard to pronounce things. And so, I get a kick out of that.
How do you actually get the job from first hearing about it to the actual finished production?
That usually does go through the agents. So, but again, it takes a couple of different forms. So it might be that they send off my animation reel to the production company, and then they listen to all of those and then come back and say, "Okay, we want to see that person, we want to see that person. Here are the sides. Here's some words that these characters have to say. Here's a description of the character," and then I would need to work up a character voice for that, and then send another audition. Sometimes they'll say, "No, we want to see you as a callback, so we'll need to see you in the studio for another audition," or "We want you to record something else and send it to us." And then we'll do callbacks. So I mean, it's never exactly the same every time.
Let's talk about the relationship between a director and or producer when you're actually in the studio and then creating the character. What sort of relationship do you guys have? And I mean, is it always a very positive relationship? And how does a character develop when it's purely coming through the voice?
Keep in mind that you've already been cast. And so you've been cast based on the character creation that you've already done in your own time. Now, they may want to change some of that, or they may, in the studio, they may say, "Well, look, we know that you developed that character and we really like that. We like everything you did about it, but maybe you can just take out this bit and put this little bit in. Maybe you can change the accent, just change the attitude slightly. We like the placement where your voice was, but maybe you can just shift it a little bit to bring in the relationship with this other character. It can be anything. But to your last point is very interesting, because it's not just about the voice, and this is so important. Voice acting for animation is just that. It's acting. And so even though the voice is the outcome, the voice is the final product of what you're creating, you really have to do everything that you would have to do theater or film or television. You have to go through that whole exact process. It's just that the voice is the only thing, is the outcome. So it's really easy to fall into, how do I say it? When you're doing animation, it's really easy to get into the mindset of that you're doing a silly voice, and then that puts all of your focus on the voice. I'm going to make my voice sound like this, and it's going to be so funny. But without an actual character scaffolding to hold that up, it's not going to fly. It has to be believable. The character has to be believable. Take SpongeBob SquarePants, for heaven's sakes. I mean, he's a sponge, right? Square sponge, living in the ocean.
And he kind of, he has a voice that kind of sounds like that.
But he's an actual being. It just so happens that his voice sounds like that. But he's a fully put together character underneath all that. That's really important. Yeah.
Okay, computer. How long can we keep the bomb in stasis?
Stasis decaying at 90% cycle. Detonation in 3 minutes.
Can we jettison it?
Any attempt to jettison the device will precipitate detonation. 100% probability.
I got cast, and it was maybe 15 minutes in the studio. So it was just the Captain Jack's ship. And it's so interesting because it's probably the shortest session I've ever had in my life, but it's the one that sort of, I still dine out on it. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say I still kind of like, people say, oh, well, what's the most high profile thing you've done? And I bring that up, because people know it. And I think it's really cool to be able to say that I was a part of it, and a very small part, but it's still cool.
Around the same time, of course, I was directing you on the BAFTA-nominated Nelly Not. How did you find doing that show, in the sense that you were voicing so many different characters, and obviously there probably isn't a lot of time to think about the character's backstory and all of that, because it's for younger children. How do you actually go about changing your voice so quickly for so many different characters in such a relatively short space of time? That's quite hard, isn't it?
As you know, I was cast originally to do Ray Bling, this little 5-year-old guy. And then later on, they wanted Annoying Amy, who was from the East End. And so, but rather than thinking, okay, how can I change my voice for this other character? I started with, who is this other character? And how would she sound? She's Annoying Amy, so maybe her voice is annoying. So I work at it from that angle. And I don't know if you ever know this, if you've ever heard the story about how the voice for Amy came about. Did you ever know this story? Did I tell you really quickly?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so I found out that they were going to ask me to do this other character, Annoying Amy. She's from the East End, and I live in the East End of London. And so my husband and I were at the food court at the local mall one day, and we were eating, I tell my students this story all the time, and we were eating our jacket potatoes, and I just stopped, and my husband, who's kind of used to bizarre behavior, he goes, What are you doing? I go, it's her. Behind me, it's Annoying Amy. I heard the voice, right? And in those days, I carried around a little tape recorder with me in case I got inspired with the character voice. And so I kind of got a glimpse of her. And it's about 75 years old, this woman. And so I followed her into the bathroom with my tape recorder. And I told her that I was, what I was doing, but I didn't say that the name of the character was Annoying Amy. But I said, your voice is just perfect. Would you mind just saying something? And she said, I'm not kidding you. I don't know what to say. And I just went, oh, what if you just talk about the weather or something? She goes, it's very nice this time of year. And that became the voice of Annoying Amy. So I share that with my students as a story of like, pay attention to all the voices around you, on the bus, on the train, in the mall, over your jacket potato. There's character voices everywhere that you can fold into what you're doing. So it's endless, the what's the word, fodder for your character voice. It's just all around you all the time.
What sort of things would you categorize as helpful notes to voiceover artists and very unhelpful notes?
So a very unhelpful direction for narration would be, for example, could you make the inflection go up on that word? Or could you pause for 2 seconds after that sentence? Or could you just, and so all of that direction is superficial. That's just like change what your voice sounds like. But what would be helpful would be if they said something like, this is the part where the pride in the company needs to shine through. Or we need to give the listener a little bit of extra time to take in that information. Those are foundational directional notes, so much more helpful, because what the voice actor has to do is take whatever direction they're given and translate that into something that actually changes the DNA of the read, and not just what's floating on top. You can tell me, oh, do an inflection like that. And so then I would go, la, 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 but without knowing why I'm doing it, it's only vocal manipulation as opposed to authentic communication. That's the distinction. So the more foundational comments a director can make, the easier it is for everyone. A line reading, so that's like the bane of the voice actor's life, is to have someone, especially if it's from the very beginning of the session. So, hi, yeah, welcome, come in. So, and then the director says, so, yeah, the way I hear this is la 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 la. And now you're forced to abandon all of this deep work that you've already done on the script, and then just do an impression of them, but make it sound right. It's not a good way to work.
You talked there about your book. Tell us a little bit about the book, what's going to be in it.
The title is Voiceover Narration, Creating Performances from the Inside Out. So this is a book, first of all, it's a book about just narration, which makes it unusual. But also it's kind of a blending of voiceover narration and mindfulness. So it's what goes on inside a great narrator, the mind, body, voice kind of connection. What goes on inside a great narrator to make them great. So how do they manage nervous energy? How do they stop from their analytical mind getting in the way of their performing? So it's all that stuff.
What's your favorite voice that you've done, and can we have a sample?
Well, the one that kind of comes out most often, and I have to tell you that my husband always tells people that he goes to bed with a different woman every night. But unfortunately, he wakes up with the same one. But the one that I tend to do most often, don't ask me why, is the one that annoys him the most. I don't know why, but if I say to his name is Bruce, if I say to him,
I love you, baby Bruce,
he just goes, ugh, and he really hates it, but it makes me want to do it even more. But that's one that I just really enjoy doing.
Hi, hello, hi.
Just this, this ridiculous little girl.
Dian Perry, on that note, I'd like to thank you so much for being part of Spotlight. Dian, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Brendan. Thank you.